Chapter 10 Accountability and Inmates of Hell. I had felt quite dejected after seeing the treatment meted out to those who had indulged in bringing about alterations and innovations in their religion. My misery had compounded as I had also found quite a few acquaintances amongst them. Saleh took me back to the pond of Kausar to soothe my nerves. I felt better after I had spent some time in that pleasant environment all by myself. Thereafter, Saleh brought me back to the plane of judgment. On our way back, he informed me that testimony of the remaining messengers of God had been completed in our absence, and the general accountability stage has commenced. This stage had also begun with the followers of the last prophet. Most people of this group had already heard Almighty's verdict after having gone through the process. It means that I missed a very important part of the accountability process, I said. Yes, you did, but don't worry. In the paradise, you will be able to watch its audio-video recording whenever you wish to do so. He laughingly responded to my question. But that would be no match for watching it in real time, I responded with a smile. Let me tell you something very interesting though. When those followers of the last prophet who had indulged in shirk were taken to task, a large number denied that they ever participated in these heinous practices. Interestingly, they included people not only from the later eras, but also those idol worshippers of Mecca who had directly benefited from the presence of the last prophet. And what was the reason for their denial? I asked. The reason was that everyone has realized that today nobody has any power except the Almighty. Initially, these idol worshippers tried to find and call their gods, goddesses, and idols. Obviously, nobody answered their prayers. Even the angels and pious human beings they used to call for help instead of God denied having anything to do with their actions. Hence, they had no option but to deny their doings. Obviously, it was of no use, and they were sentenced to a lifetime in hell. Who is going through the accountability process now? I asked. Right now, it is the people from your era. It is for this reason that I have brought you here. As you can see, one by one, people are being presented before the Almighty for accountability. 2 angels accompany each person. One walks behind him, escorting him to the throne, while the other walks along with him, carrying his book of deeds. The angel who is behind is called Saik, and the one who has the book of deeds is known as Shaheed. Saik is responsible for escorting a person from the plane of judgment to the throne, whereas Shaheed testifies about his deeds, as written in the record. In fact, they are the same angels who were present with every human being in the previous life. The one on the right had the job of noting down good deeds, whereas the one on the left documented the bad deeds. They were referred to as the honorable recorders in the Quran. But over here, who gets the role of Saik and who has the responsibility of the Shaheed? I inquired. Only God knows it. He assigns their responsibilities just before an individual is to be presented before him. When we reached there, we saw a civil servant who was in the dock. The Almighty asked him, "What did you accomplish in the world?" Trembling, he replied, "O God, no doubt I committed some mistakes. However, afterwards I worshipped you a lot. I dedicated the rest of my life for your religion." The angel standing by him said, following a cue by the Almighty, "He has told the truth, my Lord." He was asked again, You were a civil servant. Did you indulge in bribery? Did you force people to offer you bribes? Did you illegitimately enforce the law too harshly so that people were forced to offer you bribes? He admitted, "Yes, I did, but I repented afterwards." The Almighty thundered, "You repented? Did you?" He could not utter a word in reply. The angel moved forward and started to read out aloud from his book of deeds. According to the record, he had constructed a house with his ill-gotten money and had lived in that house all his life. He had invested the money to increase his net worth and then used it to pay for the higher education of his children. He bought lots of ornaments and jewelry for his wife, using the same illegitimate income. He continued to benefit from his wealth until his death. However, he did repent verbally, and after retirement he adopted the usual religious practice and appearance of a typical Muslim, such as keeping a beard, wearing a cap, praying regularly, etc. As soon as the angel stopped speaking, the Almighty said, "Put his book of deeds in the scale of justice." The angel on the right, Shaheed, took out his good deeds and placed them in the scale. Then the angel called Saik on the left side took out his bad deeds and placed them in the other arm of the scale. The civil servant watched all this, totally helpless and terrified. As soon as the angels finished their task, the result was obvious. Left arm of the scale had completely outweighed the right arm. What he had earned through bribery, injustice, and abuse of power completely overshadowed his good deeds. He started to weep and begged for mercy. Almighty's voice boomed, "Did you ever feel pity for the people you abused and extorted the money from? See that all you had earned is of no use to you today. You are destined to hell." At that, the angel placed the book of deeds in his left hand. The man started to lament even louder. "I did not do anything for myself. Whatever I did was for the sake of my wife and children. For God's sake, let me go. Punish my family instead." The angels replied, "They will be dealt with on their turn. For now, move on to your cursed destination." The two angels dragged him away towards hell, beating him heartlessly. Next person to appear before the Almighty was a senior police officer. The Almighty Lord did not even address him directly. He asked the angel standing next to him about the contents of his book of deeds. In response, the angel narrated all the crimes he had committed in his life. They included heinous crimes such as cruelty against public, murder of innocent people, patronage of gambling dens and brothels, adultery, drinking, corruption, and pleasure-mongering. On the other hand, his good deeds were only those Eid prayers that he had attended half-heartedly to please his superiors. The Almighty said to him, "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" He replied, "My Lord, my conduct was a product of the environment I lived in. Bribery was prevalent all around. I did not want to indulge in it, but was forced to do so due to the pressures of my superiors and the demands of society." The Almighty thundered, "So you were forced to resort to what you did?" He then summoned a junior police officer who had worked under him in the previous life. In a short while, a very good-looking man, dressed in fine clothes, appeared. The Almighty addressed him, "You also served in the police force with this person. Why did you not choose the path of oppression and corruption, despite the prevailing atmosphere?" He replied, "My Lord, it was the fear of appearing before you today that kept me away from accepting bribes. I refused to do so despite pressure from my colleagues. Even though I spent my life in abject poverty, I did not compromise on justice for the sake of money. You are right. As a consequence, I have given a lot of weight to the small number of your good deeds and have awarded you with the life in the everlasting paradise. He then addressed the first police officer. The choice you had was not about whether to get rich by choosing corruption, oppression and injustice, or to live a life of poverty. Rather, the choice was to live a life of righteousness and go to paradise, or indulge in oppression and go to hell. You chose to go to hell. Thus hell is your fate for the rest of your life. The police officer was not willing to give up so easily. He started to weep and said, "My lord, Satan misled me." The Almighty thundered, "No, in reality, you were yourself a devil, even though for me you were even more helpless than an insignificant ant. You are a worthless man. Even when you oppressed other human beings, I was watching you. However, I gave you time to correct yourself. You did not avail of it. You were under the impression that you would not have to face me in this court. Now you can see that you were wrong." As these words, full of wrath and fury, were delivered, the sound of the roaring flames of hell coming from the left of the plane of judgment became progressively louder. The hearts of people present there were trembling with fear. People were petrified to death. Everyone seemed extremely tense. Their eyes had a blank look, and the faces had darkened with misery. Their hearts beat so fast as if they would pop out of their chests. However, today there was nowhere to run to and no place to hide. As each wrongdoer received the verdict, other offenders felt increasingly worse. There were all sorts of people waiting for their turn. They included emperors, extremely powerful leaders, wheeler-dealers, dictators, billionaires, famous celebrities, and power brokers. All of them were waiting helplessly for their fate to be decided, like slaves, perhaps more like a flock of sheep. Today, there was no one who could save them. Record of deeds of the police officer was put in the scale of justice. As expected, the left arm was significantly lower. The angel tried to hand him over his record in his left hand, but he pulled it back. Obviously, he was nothing in strength as compared to the angel, who tied his hands at his back and then shoved the record in his left hand. Thereafter, both angels started thrashing him and dragged him away towards the roaring flames of hell, where an even worse fate awaited him. The person brought in next was a fabulously rich man. He was asked, "You left behind mounds of wealth. Say, how did you earn it and how did you spend it?" He submitted, "My lord, I earned my wealth through trade. Whatever I earned, I spent on the poor." The Lord signaled to the angel standing next to him. He started to narrate the details. The man earned billions. Initially, he had a small business. He earned huge profits through adulteration and hoarding of essential goods like sugar, flour, etc. His business expanded rapidly due to these despicable practices. Later on, he expanded to other businesses. However, this time he formed a cartel of criminal-minded businessmen. The basic purpose of this cartel was to manipulate the market in order to inflate prices for various commodities. This cartel included influential people who used their political connections as well as bribery to fix favorable prices. As a result, the common man suffered, while the profits of these businessmen increased from millions to billions and then to trillions. In order to project a good image of himself in the society, he donated petty sums to charity from time to time and earned praise for it. Once the angel had completed his statement, there was not much left to say. However, the businessman was quite cunning. He started to shout and claimed that what had just been said was not true and that he was innocent. He claimed that he did everything according to the prevalent law, and in response to the requirements of the marketplace. He alleged that the angel was lying and that there was no proof against him. He was wailing relentlessly. The Almighty replied, "So you need proof? That shall be provided." With these words, his ability to speak was taken away. Suddenly, his hands started talking. They narrated more or less the same statement as was put forward by the angel. A similar testimony was provided by his feet and by the rest of his body. Finally, his heart started talking and brought forward hitherto unknown intentions that were not even recorded in the angel's ledger. After this account, there was nothing left to say. The only additional misery ordained on him was that the angels were ordered to heat up all his wealth and sear his body with it. That was in addition to the regular sufferings of the hell. The angels dragged him away mercilessly towards his final abode. One by one, people were being brought in, and their cases were being decided. Some of them were too horrible to watch. A person was brought in. It looked like he had tons of good deeds to his credit. Prayers, pilgrimages to Mecca, fasting, nawafils, and all kind of supplications one could think of. However, once the angel started mentioning his relations with other human beings, it became obvious that there were people against whom he had used foul language. Some he had deprived of their belongings, others he had wrongfully accused, and a few he had beaten up badly, and so on. All of his victims were called in. His good deeds were divided amongst them in proportion to the grievances caused to them. This went on until he ran out of good deeds. However, there were some more victims still in the queue. To compensate them, their bad deeds were transferred to his account. When it came down to weighing, left side of the scale weighed a lot more. The man started to cry, but in vain. The angels mercilessly dragged him away to the hell. Watching some of those cases got me worried about my own fate. One of them was a scholar. Having been reminded of the blessings bestowed upon him, he was asked what he had done to express his gratefulness to God. He boasted about his scholastic achievements and preaching efforts. He was told that he was lying. He had done whatever he had, only to be known as a great scholar. That reward had already been given to him in the world. He had become known as a renowned scholar. The decision was obvious. Angels dragged him away face downwards towards hell. A martyr and a generous person met the same fate. When questioned, they boasted about their good deeds, but they were given the same verdict. All they had done was to earn fame and a name in the world, which they had already received. They did not do anything for God. Hence, today, God did not have anything good to bless them with either. They were also sent to hell. Watching these scenes, I was trying to visualize those of my deeds that I had performed solely for God, as well as those that I did to earn a place in the hearts of people in the world. During this process of judgment and accountability, some strange and hitherto unknown things were being brought to light. They included facts about conspiracies, assassination of famous personalities, events that took place at homes, in offices, and at local or international level. The factors behind those events, the people involved, details of secret and closed-door meetings, how the things started and then reached their culmination, came out as they had actually happened. Everything had become clear as daylight today. Honorable were becoming dishonorable. Noble were coming out as ignoble. God witnessed each and every moment of the lives of people who lived their lives totally oblivious of Him. Neither a word was uttered, nor did a thought or intent came to a mind without being noticed by Him. Every act, even smaller than the smallest particle, had been recorded. Today, the truth was being brought to surface for all to see in such a way that every person felt denuded. I was witnessing these scenes and thinking about my own sins and shortcomings. I was afraid for my own fate. What would happen if my sins and misdeeds were revealed? Even without punishment, the awareness that everyone would come to know about my misdeeds would itself be the greatest and most humiliating punishment of the day. Saleh had probably read my mind. Patting me on the back, he said, God will never humiliate His pious servants. His exalted benevolence will conceal their bad deeds. Nobody will come to know of their weaknesses, faltering or sins. Do not worry. You won't find anyone more benevolent and magnanimous than your Lord. I have no doubt about it. However, right now I am witnessing the grasp of the Almighty. The facade of nobility is also being torn away from the faces of evildoers prior to their departure to eternal torture. I muttered worriedly. Saleh consoled me. This treatment is being meted out to the criminals only. Before subjecting them to physical punishment, they are also being put through the mental torture of humiliation. Meanwhile, another person was brought in. As soon as he approached the Almighty, he lamented, "O God, I was born in a very poor family. I spent my childhood in extreme poverty. I made some mistakes during my youth. Please forgive me." He asked an angel, "Did I test him through poverty?" The angel replied respectfully, "O God, he is right about poverty. However, what he calls some mistakes were actually crimes of the most heinous nature. He chose to be a bandit, to grab a little cash, a mobile phone, and such other petty things. He not only injured a lot of human beings, but also killed many." So this is what the truth is. These words were uttered with such rage and ferocity that the future of the man became crystal clear. "O despicable creature! No doubt I destined you to be born in a poor family. Yet I gave you a chance to progress by endowing you with a healthy body and a lot of capabilities. If you had endeavored the right way, I would have given you your share of livelihood that had already been destined for you. However, you got the very same share by looting and killing humans. Now you have to face the consequences of your misdeeds by taking over sins of all those people you had either killed or harmed. The verdict is that you will burn in eternal hell, and you shall live through that torture forever. You are cursed. You have to face endless pain." As soon as the verdict was finalized, the angels pounced on him and, thrashing him mercilessly, dragged him to hell. When I saw the next person who was presented for accountability, I felt miserable. It was no one else but Asma, Layla's friend. She was in a state even worse than what I had seen her in the last time. She was presented to the Lord. First question was asked, "Did you pray 5 times a day?" Asma stood, silent. She was asked again, "Were you paralyzed? Did you not believe in God? Did you think you were God? Did you have no time for me? Or was it someone else besides me who had bestowed worldly blessings in you?" Asma could not find any words to say in her defense. An angel replied instead of her, "Lord, she used to say, God does not need our prayers." She was correct. By now, she would have understood that I did not need her worship. She was the one who needed her prayers. Prayer is the key to paradise. How can anyone enter paradise without it? Thereafter, Asma was asked a few more questions. How did she spend her life? How did she spend her youth? How did she earn money, and where did she spend it? How much knowledge did she acquire, and how much of it she actually put in practice? Questions about obligatory charity, helping other people, fasting, Hajj, etc., and other questions were asked one by one. However, these questions only increased her misery and humiliation. At last, Asma started to wail loudly. She said, "My Lord, I was oblivious to this day. I spent my entire life like an animal. I spent my days in pursuit of money, fashion, friendships, worldly relations, and enjoyment. I had forgotten about this day of judgment and your might. My Lord, please forgive me. Send me back to earth once again. I will spend my whole life in praying and praising you. I will never disobey your commands. Please grant me one more chance. If I send you back once more, you will still do the same deeds as you did the first time. Even if I grant you one more chance, your behavior will not change. I had conveyed my message to you, but your eyes were closed. You had become blind. That is why you shall be thrown in the dark chasm of hell. There is neither forgiveness nor a second chance for you." Asma faced the same horrible fate as meted out to other criminals prior to her. Having witnessed Asma's fate, I became extremely disturbed. Subconsciously, I was afraid that if the same horrible punishment was awarded to my son Jamshed, perhaps I would not be able to witness it. I said to Saleh, "I do not have the strength to stay here any more. Please take me away." Saleh understood my condition. Without a word, he held my hand and started moving in a certain direction. All along the way, we saw horrible scenes. There were people who were in the last stages of extreme suffering after being exposed to the severest hardships in the plane of judgment for innumerable centuries. People who had possessed all sorts of abilities in various fields were moving around in a pitiable condition. They included the wealthy, the powerful, the influential, the intelligent, the beautiful, and people who had authority in the world. They had everything in the world. What they did not have was faith and abundance of good deeds. They were the most deprived today. The wealthy were the saddest. Those who were free of all worries in the world were in the worst shape here. Those who had been made to suffer for thousands of years were praying for death, hoping for mercy, seeking intercession or favor. They were wandering around in a miserable state and being randomly beaten up by the angels. Forlorn and completely exhausted with hunger and thirst, their condition was pitiable. The intensity of heat was taking its toll, and they were prepared to do anything to gain respite, no matter how brief. They were even willing to sacrifice their children, wives and families, their entire wealth and previous possessions in return for an escape from their predicament. However, it was not possible. The opportunity of being eligible to receive the gift of paradise in return for spending a little money or time in the way of God was now lost. They had spent their entire lives on their careers, children and property. Alas, if only they had also spent a portion of their time in the service of God, and in preparation for this day, they would not have been in such a dire state. In the plane of judgment, names of people were being called regularly. When a person was called, 2 angels would quickly move in his direction and present him in front of the exalted Creator. It seemed that the angels had their targets in sight, and from a crowd of millions, they could find the required person in no time. My eyes searched for Jamshed subconsciously, but I could not locate him anywhere. Saleh saw my predicament and said, I am not taking you to him deliberately. A verdict for hell has already been announced for his wife, children, and in-laws. No one knows what will be his fate. It would be best if you do not meet him till such time God decides something for him. On hearing his opinion, I should have become gloomy and despondent. However, somehow, and for an unknown reason, a different feeling overtook me. I said to Saleh, whatever be the decision of my God, it will be entirely acceptable to me. I may love my son a lot, but God loves him and all of his creatures thousands of times more than anyone else does. In fact, if the affection of all beings is taken collectively, my Creator loves his beings much more than that. If there is 1% chance of being forgiven, he will be forgiven. On the other hand, if he is not worthy of forgiveness under any circumstances, then I have no sympathy for someone who is a criminal of such magnitude in the eyes of my Creator, even if he is my son. On hearing this, Saleh smiled and said, You are so different, so very different. No, I am neither different nor better. In fact, my Creator is supreme. He has filled my heart with peace and tranquility. I am not concerned about anything now. That's the correct way to think. Now you have taken a turn for better. You have again become Abdullah, a servant of God, rather than being merely a father. I can tell you that even now there is a chance for Jamshed to be forgiven. God Almighty is using hardships suffered in the plane of judgment as redemption of sins for many, and after taking into account their good deeds, He is forgiving them. It was a coincidence that you witnessed the accountability of the convicted. Even now, some people are being forgiven as according to the exalted standards of justice of God. No truly good deed is ignored. I replied, No doubt, God values all good deeds. Where are we heading now? We are going to go towards the hell. I would like you to meet the inmates of hell. Do we have to be actually in the hell to do that? No, the condemned have now been moved in close proximity of hell. On the left, where you can see the flat ground, a path progressively gets deeper and ultimately becomes a ditch. The 7 doors leading to hell are located in it. As you read in the Quran, there are 7 categories of convicts. Each enters through one of the 7 doors. While Saleh was explaining these details, I saw a path that was sloping downwards in the flat field. We did not go down that path, but started to walk on the higher ground adjacent to it. In a short while, the lower path narrowed and took the shape of a ditch. Since we were on high ground, we could see the scene down below clearly. Angels were positioned all along the path. They were bringing the convicts, beating and dragging them in the process. A little farther on, there was a huge crowd on the narrow path and in the ditch. Ugly, wretched men and women were jam-packed there like sardines in a can. They were cruel, lewd sinners whose fate had already been announced. They were being held there like animals in a pen prior to being sent to hell. Every now and then, flames of hellfire rose and reached skywards. The impact of these flames had colored the sky red. Noise of the fire burning with ferocity was shaking the hearts of these convicts. Every once a while, a stray spark, as big as a palace, would fall in this ditch and would cause a huge commotion. In order to avoid this ball of fire, people would run trampling and jumping over others. The frequency of this increased whenever a major convict was brought towards this group. A ball of fire would welcome him, enhancing the anguish and suffering of the sinners. Saleh pointed in a certain direction and said to me, "Look there." When I looked in that direction, I could suddenly hear the voices coming from there clearly. They were leaders and their followers arguing amongst themselves. The followers said to their leaders, "We opposed the truth at your behest. You promised to save us if we were to face any punishment in the hereafter. Can you now take over some of our punishment from us, or at least show us a way out of it? After all, you were all very intelligent and had a solution for every problem." The leaders replied, "If we knew a way, we would have saved ourselves first. In addition, we did not say that you must follow us. We did not force you to do so. You followed ways suggested by us, as it was in your interest. We will have to face the music together." On hearing this, the followers said, "O God, these leaders led us astray. Therefore, make them suffer twice the punishment we receive." The leaders replied, "How would cursing us help you?" Witnessing this, Saleh commented, "There will be double punishment for all of them, as the followers became the leaders of those that came thereafter, and thus led them astray. Look over there, more of their followers are arriving." When I looked in that direction, I saw that the commotion had increased. Fervent pushing and shoving had started in the crowd as more sinners were brought in to the already crowded space. The leaders lamented that the place was already packed, and still more of the wretched and condemned were being brought in. On receiving such an unwelcome reception, the newcomers also lost their cool. Verbal abuses flew in the air. Scuffles ensued soon. It was not possible for me to truly appreciate the condition of these miserable people just by watching them and listening to them in this suffocating environment of kicking, punching, pushing, shoving and shouting. One had to personally experience such misery to fathom its true extent. However, I was sure that these people must have been remembering their previous lives with utmost regret, where they had every opportunity to strive for paradise, but sadly they chose hell. They earned eternal misery just for the sake of a few days of pleasure, benefits, desires, and prejudices. Saleh said to me, "These people have not even been sent to hell yet. The punishment over there will be much more severe. They will have a yoke placed around their necks as a mark of slavery and disgrace. Their clothes will be inflammable, made from sulphur and coal tar that would catch fire from a distance. The fire would scald their faces and bodies. They will writhe in pain, but no one will come to their help, nor will anybody have mercy on them. Their skin, once totally burnt, will be replaced by a new skin that will develop a severe itch. They will scratch themselves so strenuously that they will bleed from everywhere, but the itch would neither go nor decrease in severity. Whenever they are hungry, they will have thorn-covered bushes and fruit of bitter, poisonous zakum trees. For drinking, there will be pungent and smelly sediment of pus, boiling water, and bubbling hot oil. It will burn the innards of their stomachs and will boil inside their bellies. The intensity of their thirst would be such that, like a camel that is dying of thirst, they would be forced to drink whatever is available to them. These boiling liquids will burn and destroy their intestines, pushing them out of their bodies. In hell, angels will bludgeon them with mammoth hammers. Their bodies will be severely wounded. The blood and pus that will ooze from their wounds will be given to other convicts to drink. Thereafter, they will be tied by chains and will be thrown in a tight place. Death will approach them from every side, yet they will not die. At that moment, the best news for them will be to die, but they will not die. At short intervals, they will continue to suffer these tortures and punishments forever. On hearing these horrendous details, I was shaken up. Saleh added more to his earlier discourse. The condemned, prior to being sent to hell, will be brought here and made to sit on their knees around the corners of hell. Thus, their first punishment would be to watch the entire process with their own eyes. Then in groups, they will be rammed into the narrow and dark crevices in hell, and the process of punishment I have just described will commence. So will all dwellers of hell be subjected to the same treatment? I asked. No, what I have narrated will be the fate of major sinners. Others will receive a somewhat lighter punishment. However, even that light treatment will be beyond endurance. Saleh then pointed in another direction. I noticed some hideous and ugly characters. Saleh gave their identities, explaining to me as to who had denied the message of which messenger of God and opposed him. I particularly took a good look at Nimrud and Pharaoh, as I had heard a lot about them. Along with them were Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, and other leaders of the tribe of Quraysh. Their condition was so horrible that it was beyond words to describe. These so-called powerful leaders of their times were in a condition much worse than that of even the lowliest slaves. Their crime was that truth was revealed to them in its ultimate state, but they did not accept it. They chose to be defiant against God, and chose the path of being unjust and cruel against his creatures. While I was lost in the scene, Saleh brought a very strange scene to my attention. A giant-sized man was standing in the middle of this commotion. Flames were emanating from his body, and he was enslaved in chains. He was addressing the condemned in these words: See, what God promised you was true, and the promises I made to you were all lies. Do not curse me today. I am not responsible for any of your deeds. I am not at fault. I had no control over you. Whatever you did was of your own free will and accord. If you listened to me, how could that be my fault? Do not blame me. Blame yourselves. Today, neither I can do anything for you, nor you can do anything for me. I could guess from the contents of his speech as to who he was. To confirm it, I turned towards Saleh. He said, You have guessed correctly. He is Satan, the one who was the most disobedient towards God. Today, the harshest punishment will also be for him. However, other people will also receive punishment for their doings. I was witnessing this scene from a vantage point, and was thanking God Almighty in my heart for having protected me from the deceptions and evils of Satan. Even though this disgraced character had tried to mislead me from the right path on a number of occasions in my life, God had always kept me under his protection. It was my routine to seek God's protection from the accursed Satan often. Thus my God had kept my dignity intact. Yet those who followed their carnal desires and befriended Satan had met the worst end. At that moment, Saleh turned towards me and said, Abdullah, let's go. You are being called. Why? I asked. Jamshed is about to be presented for his accountability. Your testimony is required. My testimony? Yes, your testimony. Will I be a witness for him or against him? Listen, if God has decided to forgive him, he will ask you something whose answer will go in his favor. On the other hand, if he has decided to punish him for his sins, he will ask you something that will go against him. It is also possible that the Almighty decides to deal with him in an entirely different way. Only God knows the final outcome. My nerves that had calmed down by now started to play up again. With a trembling heart and unsteady steps, I accompanied Saleh.